We are working good. Hey, welcome to my last man, close the door, no way out. Welcome to my session here about our exciting new Drupal8 theme layer. Now that I'm in the States, I learned that I have to warn people. I'm a Dane, and those of you who know Danes, we have a more rough approach to things, so I curse like a sailor, and I think even worse. Just so if you get offended by my language, I'm very sorry. So now the formality is out. These slides are going to be at GitHub, so if you're a grammar Nazi and find like me missing spelling and stuff, I do accept patches for the slide, just to get that out of the way. So first of all, this is me, MordenDK. This is my Twitter handle, and if you want to follow my shouting and screaming about stuff, that's where you do that. This is, by the way, me 20 years ago when I had hair on my head instead of all over my body. It's just to keep it a little bit down. But this is my whole name, Morten Birk Heidi Jørgensen. I've learned in the States that the only place apparently they can say this name is in Minnesota, which is a good thing. Yeah, it's kind of like they get the Jørgensen thing. But this is actually my normal last name I use in the States. If you do a spelling error on this, it's really easy. And yes, this is the photo op. This is always the only slide that gets out of my sessions. So it's like, there's probably somebody right now taking a picture of this and put it online. They're like, God damn it. No, I've been bitching and moaning about Drupal's markup for the last 8 years. And that is why I'm like, well, you know, it's close by my last name. So yeah, I've been here for 8 years. I've run an organization called Frontend United. And Frontend United is basically a therapy group and a fighting organization of front-end developers where you can come and try on our shoulders. We do a yearly event in Europe. Hope to do that same thing in the States. It is basically just a camp, but only for Drupal front-enders. It's been a lot of fun to do that. We've done it 5 times so far in Europe. It's been kind of one of the places we try to build a common ground to discuss front-end in Drupal. I am also the king in the Danish Drupal community. I'm newly elected chairman. I have a theme called the Mothership, which apparently is so opinionated that it actually scares some people, which I take as a good thing. I'm also a Drupal Association board member, so everything that's wrong with the DA is probably my fault now. It used to be somebody else's fault, so that's both good and bad. I run a small little shop called Geek Royale, and that's my logo, and I have stickers with me if you want. You can take that later on. So, what is actually wrong with Drupal theming today? From a front-end perspective, because if you're deaf, you can moan about that in another place. I figured out after many years of thinking that it's actually down to 2 things. The divitus, which is the very rich markup, as I call it, that Drupal puts out, is very good of describing any possible use case that you might gonna hit into, and you're gonna end up having 3 divs around everything and classes. And I know this is kind of a made-up markup, but this is probably what you've all been hitting into. That's one of the issues. The other issue is the CSS overload, that we have so many CSS files, there's so many classes that can be very hard when you first come in to actually figure out what goes on. Why does Drupal do all this stuff? The overload of just describing each field is the same thing. We don't keep it simple, we keep it overly complicated to try to catch every possible case that might gonna be. So it goes down to like only 2 issues, the markup and the CSS. But for a front-ender, that's pretty much all we do. So pretty much that ends up Drupal being a piece of shit to work with. Which is, by the way, how many themers are in here? How many here likes to work with Drupal? It's about 2 people who kept their arm up the themers, just for the record. This is the usual thing, that it's not an enjoyable experience for us. So that's the thing we're trying to change. But you know, why does it turn out to be this thing? Well, there's a lot of people we can blame on that. We can blame the developers. Why do we want to blame the developers? Well, they wrote the code. Why didn't you write the thing I wanted? Or we cannot actually blame the themer as well, because the themer never told anybody what they actually wanted. We're just sitting, back in the line and whining about stuff. Because Drupal has this idea that this one markup to rule them all, which was a good thing back when we used CSS guard and was playing around with that. That's back in 2000. And the reason that all of this came out was I had about 2 years ago I was in Denver, and I met WebChick at a shooting range. And WebChick with a gun is, by the way, scary. But sitting in the car with her, we were talking back and forth. I was whining about why Drupal was so wrong. And at some point, WebChick told me, you know what? Nobody told us what to do. And me being a man and a front-ender and a Dane, that's not the cleverest possible combination. That made me kind of not think about that. It took me about a month, and suddenly like, wait a minute, nobody told us what to do. Aha! So the developers had no idea what we actually wanted before they gave it to us, and then we began to whine and say it was all wrong. That's not how you do things if you're like that semi-intelligent. So that began to be kind of a thing we began to look more to, like, you know, and how to get it done. We tried first off doing it pretty please. You know, oh, can we please get this changed the way we want to? That's not how stuff goes in Drupal, because I believe in anchor-driven development. And anchor-driven development is basically, you know, how open source works. You have an edge and you scratch it. When you do an anchor-driven development, you take an axe and you just chop the fuck up on it, right? You just go nuts at it. You can use that energy in two ways. You could be an asshole and scream and shout at people. That will get you absolutely nowhere. Or you can take all that energy and gather a little group and then begin to punch it out and figure out how to do that. So that was actually what we did. We bitched and moaned a lot in small rooms where people couldn't hear us. And then we were smiling and talking about this new amazing thing we were trying to do. So 2 years ago in Amsterdam, we had a sprint, a 2-day front-end united, 200 people met up there. And we sat down the first and said, okay, what is actually wrong with Drupal? And we defined that. Then at the same time in San Francisco, there was a sprint going on with about 20 developers just sitting there, chicks, John Open, like people hide in our system. And they were like, oh, okay, it's themers, what do you actually want? So we sent them a spreadsheet with all the things we wanted. And then because we're in Amsterdam, we went out partying. And then the next day, there was this dude doing this talk about Twig. And then I was like, yeah, that might sound good. The next morning, chicks was like, I know what we're going to do. We're just going to commit Twig to Drupal core. And we were like, well, maybe, we don't know. But then it was like, if we do this, we have to rewrite every piece of Drupal's markup and CSS. Hey, let's go with Twig. That was how it was decided, actually. It's a little bit sad, because this is how we feel about PHP template. It's like, it's simply too much to get done on it. So, you know, by adding Twig in, you have a little bit of French elegance, a little bit of like elegant and beautiful system to use instead of this bastardized theme layer we have used. That would make it way better. But what we started off was actually try to make a plan for this. How are we actually going to do this? So we started out by saying, well, you know what? Drupal is right now trying to do everything for 100%. The reason we have 3 divs and that many classes, you can describe each field, you can actually target with your CSS, it's very, very flexible, but it's simply not what you have to, it's not the thing you need on a day-to-day work. Drupal's theme layer is kind of pointing on all the edge cases instead of pointing on what you actually need to do each day. So by building on sensible use cases instead of what if, we will be able to actually make the markup clear, you know, and don't dumb it down. I mean, I know that themers are not that dumb. I mean, we understand these complex elements. It's the idea of, oh no, we cannot be giving you this bunch of classes because you cannot figure out how to jack them out yourself. It kind of does not make any sense. And then the other thing was like, you know, provide tools, provide visibility. Make the system consistent, so we don't use label one place and title another place. Kind of make it as a beautiful system instead of this bastardized add-on to Drupal. So this is kind of learned up to where we are right now in Drupal8 in the development circle. And first of all, it's built on HTML5, which to me is a blessing. Second of all, and that means that we can actually have, we're actually using the main tag right now, and we sneak that in by the backdoor. But that's still, to me, this is beginning to now look how markup should actually look. But another thing that Drupal8 is not going to support is IE6, IE7, and IE8. This is now looking smart. Because this, what it does for us is actually we can remove all the odd and even classes, we can remove all the count classes. We can actually begin to look at the markup in a modern way, instead of always having to look back. I am, though, thinking that I think that before Drupal8 comes out, IE9 is going to be dead as well, which is both good and bad. So, actually, this is one of the things we've been working on when we first started to look at Drupal. This is our install page, and if you begin to look at it, how the markup is actually structured, we have a single class that just says installer page. Right now we're using LDAX container as the wrappers following Smack standards. We have debug built in directly. You can actually, when you see we resize the page, it's working responsive as well. Let's see what else it does. Beautiful little things. When you open up the whole markup here, this is to me how basic Drupal markup out of the box comes out. The good thing is it's easy here as well to translate it and to build it into whatever you want. Another thing we've done is we've removed the bad practice of having IDs all over, so you don't have your site sections and so forth, a header and a footer being an ID anymore. We're actually trying to put in the best practice that a front-end development has. I'm pretty sure about the 37% number. I would like to get actually the real part of it. We're still missing a small issues around, like in the notes and so forth, but just the small details. Drupal CSS is, in Drupal 7 we had the HTML class in the body. I never understood what that meant, why it was even there, but it was just there because every part of Drupal we have to describe as HTML. Doesn't make any sense. Drupal8 is basically as clean as possible right now. We can make it even cleaner, but we can get back to that. The CSS structure now in Drupal8 is built on the SMAX principles. I guess you all know what SMAX is. So it's a documentation standard of how you write CSS. Jonathan Snoop did a talk about it at DrupalCon in Portland. Yeah. And it's basically just beginning to be an industry standard of how we describe and build CSS. It is worth going in and reading. I'm adding the node IDs where we actually have a real CSS documentation now, and it's written by front-enders, not back-end developers. So it's been a long, hard road to get this in. We are changing some of the fields, file names in CSS, how it's worked. I personally approved it after a long code sprint in Sydney. John has forced me to. John Orban was the lead on that. What it basically does is, as we had in Drupal 7, we had the base and the add and the theme CSS files. We're using the same, but we're modifying that into following the SMAC standards as well, so following industry standards. Another crazy thing in Drupal8 is this. This is my Drupal8 site. This folder down here, themes. The first thing everybody does in the theme layer when they came into Drupal the first day is like they drop down the theme in the themes folder because that's where it lives. And then you're told you're wrong. In Drupal8, we have moved everything from core into a core folder, so your themes actually live in themes. I know it's very much crazy talk. This is one of the things of providing common sense into the way we work. If you can still have them in your site/all site/site name themes, but they can actually live just in themes. So you don't get that first experience with Drupal8 being like, I dropped my themes into the themes folder, and now Drupal tells me I'm an idiot. Like, fuck you, Drupal. If you go into a module and you need to figure out, I need my block template, you go into block and you have templates, and that's where they live. Because here's the sweet thing about Drupal8. We're removing all of the theme functions, so they have to be a template. That means that we cannot more sneak markup from a module out to Drupal. We have to pass it through a template, which means that we now as themers can actually figure out what goes on. So you don't have to use 6 days like backtracking and like figuring out which pre-process actually did this. Another thing that's been an issue for us has been like figuring out actually where the stuff comes from. So normally you would go and you look at your markup because that's where we work. And like, where's this stuff at? Well, here's a sweet thing. If you go into a settings file and you set settings strict debug to true, this will happen. All of this beautiful things on it. It says theme debug. Oh, I'm calling the node. Here's my file name suggestions. Node -- article. Node -3. Node view. Boom boom. No. Good old common sense. So you actually don't have to hunt down anymore here. What is this actually called? We just tell you right away. So you can just copy that piece of code in, create your new file, and be done with it. This is about like what? An hour of work normally to figure out what the theme hook suggestion is actually about. Debug is my personal favorite in this. I must admit though that my theme, the mothership, has had this built in for years. It is done very, very bad and very terribly. In Drupal8 is actually done by developers, so it's logical and sweet. Another thing that we need to understand about Twig is it compiles files. And for those of us who don't understand what that actually means, it's the same thing we do in SAS. write the files, then it does something magic, and then it creates a new file. And what Twig does, it just creates, out of our Twig files, it just creates some PHP stuff that then Drupal takes care of. You don't even have to understand it anymore, which is actually what also makes it fast. Because one of the things we got Twig in was we didn't want to have database calls into a theme layer. And this is one of my little pet things, because which themer actually do a database call in their theme? The only person I know who knows about how to do a database is bad developers that puts that in. It is not a themer thing, because themes are about markup and CSS. It got us into getting Twig into core anyway, so that's good for me, because this is how I do my database calls. If I should do anything, and those who know anything about a database know that this is not efficient at all. But it's the same way I look at the markup. So if we can just separate it out. If I keep myself out of the database, could you keep yourself out of my markup? That's kind of the attitude towards it. I think we just got fixed was the branding and logo as well in Drupal8. So in the page TBL, page Twig file, you would have the logo and the site name and that stuff, and you could not move it around, and you have the blocks, and it did not work. Well, in Drupal8, that is actually gone. It is now a block, so you can actually just move it around. It's again one of these things we try to clean up. So it's all good with all this the Twig thing, but let's actually try to look at it a little bit. So this is how we used to print a variable. This is how we print it now. We don't have to do a print statement. We just call it out. If you want to do a comment, have the same thing with the curly brackets, and then you add the hashtag instead, and then you have a comment out. So it seems and feels pretty much the same. In Drupal8, Drupal7, we have these obscure, long variables that was hard to get. Especially my favorite, the unt variable, which I've always wondered, like, what is this actually? Well, how come some German guy came inside of my my variable and goes unt? What is unt? And the thing is, it will break your theme. If you go from a single language to multi-language site, and you have not defined unt, because that means it's undefined for a language, it will break your variable you're actually dragging out of the site. And what the fuck, Drupal? Really? So what you do in Twig instead is like, well, you do this dot notation, foo, bar, bash, done with this shit, if you can get the value out that way. You just drill down to it. You can also do this kind of notation instead. It's not that's beautiful. But that's the basic of it. We go from this obscure elements to like a beautiful, simple logic thing. You don't need to understand if it's an array or it's an object or if it's what kind of thing it is. You just grab the data out, simple and consistent. In the Twig layer as well, we can do simple like if-else. If true, then print this or that. In Drupal7, it has this. Now we do that instead. To me, it's simple and logical. It's actually kind of beautiful. Maybe I'm a little bit opinionated about it, but I do feel it's beautiful. A thing we're going to work a lot with now in our themes are loops. So if you basically just understand how a loop works, is there anybody here who has what is a loop? Katja said, ask them what a loop is. So a loop is basically this. You have a variable, you have some data that comes in. And you say, hey, let me go through that the first time. And then I'm going to print all the stuff out there. Then I go the second time, and so forth. So if you print out a bunch of, like, let's say class names, no, not tags, a bunch of tags that added to a node. Each loop would like print each of these out. So that's how we kind of create it. And if you always work inside the loop, you actually be able to identify the data you want to work with. So if we take this awesome theme up here and say for users in users, it's like, okay, this is the variable name. So we go, okay, user.username and info. Just give me all these elements. Then you get Cots and Joe and Jenna, Makar, and Morgan. That's team awesome. This is the only thing you need to understand about programming now. And that is, when I figured that out, I was like, whoa, this is going to be exciting. I can actually go back and think in HTML and CSS and do designs instead of doing PHP obscurities. The thing we can test on, you can do a loop length. Like how many loops are there here? How much data is there? Is it the first loop, the last loop? What is it, the index number? How far are we? What's the count of it? So you can do all these kind of simple logical elements. You can even taste on it, says, okay, how long are we down the loop? Are we on the second loop, third loop? Another thing you can do is doing a set. Set is like creating a variable inside of your template. And where it can begin to be really funny is, let's say I actually want to have a count on some data that comes out, because we have to the client want to have us to work in ID 7, so we need the count to be able to have a count class on. Well, you could do a full variable, just do a count dash loop index enter, and it will actually print this out. So small, simple operations that we work with. Instead of having to go into PHP template, figure that out, create a new variable that we then send out. We're working in 2 different files, and it's all confusing. This is just done in the same file, and easy and clean to work with. The filter is another thing. Is like if I want to do all this stuff in uppercase, I do a filter upper, which then will like transform these data structures. It is like how to put it. Filter is kind of where you can like add and do all kinds of magic PHP stuff, but you just do it with a simple command. You can do it with the pipe thingy. So if you want to do like strip tags out of the name, and you want to have it to be a title, so I want to have the M here to be large, and I want to remove all the tags around them. This is simple things I do directly in my template as well. So the thing I was trying to do about 6 months ago is not so many have actually worked with Drupal8 yet, especially not in the theme layer because it's not done. So I begin to play around with it and say, okay, let me try to do a theme. Instead of calling it Twig theme, because Twig is kind of like weak, I thought taking my Viking heritage, my theme is called Yggdrasil, and Yggdrasil is the people from Minnesota can probably pronounce it. Nobody else can. Yggdrasil is in the Norse mythology kind of the tree of life. That is where everything is. You cannot get on a higher level of badassness in trees, by the way. And I also thought that even for my ego, calling it birch theme and like starting that out was like way too much ego. And Yggdrasil also, it's really funny when you go out in the world to hear people try to say that. Just to make it worse. It is on GitHub, by the way. Also, it's going to be on D.O. So it's just at my playground out there to play with it. So what I learned very quickly when I looked at it is like we have the same file structure that we used to have in Drupal 7. So you have an HTML.twig file. It's a long, dumb name. You have the page, you have the region, you have a block, a node, and a field. It's the same structure we work in. So all that stuff you learned from Drupal 7, you can keep in your head. Our info file used to look like this in Drupal 7. In Drupal 8, it looks like this. You see, it's very, very different, right? You define your theme, and we can do this. So right down here, if you look at this, you see style sheet, remove. You can actually now theme info tell Drupal. Who said, yeah, exactly. We can actually now just tell Drupal nicely, hey, no thank you, I don't need your .theme info, blah, 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 user icon, makes everything red on my side. I can just remove that. My life is now easy. If you actually love PHP template, you can do this. You can set the engine to be PHP template so you can keep working your stuff in PHP template. I don't know why you want to do that, especially when you first begin as a themer to get into it. It's one of those stupid things in Drupal. There's going to be a bike ship to ever get it out, and we're just going to lay it over in the corner, kind of like the voting module, the poll module, and just let it die. Just as a warning. No, so yeah, actually the technique we use to like remove stuff is the fuck off and die technique, as apparently it's called, where you call a style sheet that doesn't exist in your theme and Drupal then forgets about it. It's now built directly in. I think that is a piece of beauty. When you have defined your regions, this was how we used to do it. It's like if page footer thing, well then print render page footer, okay. Now we just test and say, hey, if there's a page footer, it will print the page footer. They're these small, simple, beautiful things. When we go into a block, let's say I have, this is our standard block right now in Drupal. And of course, if I have a menu block, we all know that having a div there is kind of like, that's a crime against humanity, or at least against good markup. And we just want to add the nav class. So our way of overriding templates is still the same, the theme hook suggestions that you can actually get directly from your info file, or from the debug info. That's the same way we're doing it. We call the block and we go We have the replace function that you can, if you want to clean up, like let's say we have block and all these like class names, and I actually want to remove block because I don't need that information. Right now, Drupal prints out whole CSS strings. You can remove that with a simple replace to make it cleaner and neater to actually to look at. Because I kind of want to end up having this kind of markup. I want to be very specific in what my themes put out. It's been a wish we have heard from a lot of themers around. On the same time, we want to provide sensible defaults. It's kind of like a way to get both best of both worlds. Attributes is a thing you're gonna look into very quickly. It's kind of the here's some data and here's the attributes for it. And it used to be just like printing everything, but if you drill into it, you can actually do this, and it's pretty sweet. So let's say I have I want to grab up the classes because I want to be able to like add in new classes really easy. I can do attributes of class on an article, and it will actually print out the data. I don't know why my slides does this. It's revealed and then screws it over. So if I want to add like a foo class into my wrapper here, I just go attributes class, and it rips it out from the attributes, so that will not be printed anymore. And then you go, hey, here's my foo class, just add it in. So these are the things when we talk about making things simple and easy to work with. So when you sit and look at your template, hey, I just need this class for this place. I don't need to do a pre-process. So can I just kick the class thing down and print it? Yes, you can, just by drilling it in. And the beautiful thing is not printing it out, then when you print out attributes. Kind of how form API works, I think. I'm not really sure because I'm not a developer. But here's the thing, I was sitting and looking through like all the dumb things I've been doing over the years. And one of the worst things is this thought of example. And that's the, when you get a design from the client that has already been, like everybody signed off on it, and they're like, hey Morten, can you just theme this really quick? I'm like, thank you, yes, I'll just do this quick in Drupal. And then you have not spotted everything, and everybody signed on, and then suddenly you see this. So somehow they actually want to have like the second term to be a certain, be green and italic. And of course we could do this with Drupal, with CSS. If, let's say, if the client didn't also have given you the requirements of you have to support this in IE8. And IE8 doesn't understand the nth element, so you have to add classes into it. And now you're in this epic clusterfuck, where in Drupal 7 it's something about downloading a module and trying to rip the data out. It is a pain in the ass. But the thing I want to do here is I want to count the amount of tags there is, I want to add a comma between each of them, then I want to have a dot in the last one of them. I want to have my second term here, or second tag, having that to be a specific class. So I write off my markup really quick because I know that. So I'll go like, okay, give me a div, give me these tags, just go odd, even. Yes, we're adding the class. The designer is an idiot because he gave me that. I'm putting this in. So this is what I want to get out, right? So in my note, I first start off by saying, hey, give me the content and the field tags, and let's place them exactly where I need them. Then in my content, when I print that out, I go, well, content, can you print out all content but without field tags? Because I already printed them out once. So now we have separated content from the data. Yes, exactly. It gives a little bit of smile on your face, like, this makes sense. So I can then go in and take my fields template and I do a loop. Say for delta item and items. I don't really know what delta means, and I don't really care. Because the only thing I know is like I can do this, but I can do a cycle and say, hey, two different names, do it odd and even, and use this delta. I think it's the count or something. Anybody knows?
Yeah, it's the index.
Sweet, I learned something new today. And then I just walk through it on each element, and then I can actually get this out, odd and even, and get a count on it. So I do the count dash the loop index, well, that's where we count. And now I have this kind of markup coming out. And this is just done with the template. Drupal hasn't done anything with it. The next thing I need to know, I'm going to do tags versus tag. If there's one tag, I'm only going to say, no, this node is only tagged with one element, or it's the number of it that's interesting. Well, how about I just begin to, in Drupal 7 we have this idea that needs to be inside of a template, or inside of a function. You cannot do that in the template because that is logic. Well, I see this as what we call front-end logic. So these small elements, it doesn't make sense that you have like walk all around over to PHP and not install and get a developer like check out your code and all that stuff. You just do this in our template. I just do a test on it. How long is the length of this loop? Print it out. Either say tabs or tag and be done with it. And there's nothing more to it. This is just change it, write what you need, and get over with. If I want to add the class in the second tag, well, I have first my loop first, and I did that thing about adding in how many tags there was. Then I go, hey, if this is loop index 2, print out this string instead. And I'll add in the class and then print out the classes we are creating at the same time. So voila, here's my class I need for only this single instance, nothing else. And this kind of gives us the whole elements of it. And if we look here, what I do also is I test here, say this class will add the comma. If I'm on the last loop, add the dot, or else if anything else comes out, just print it out normally. And now I have this kind of markup. I don't define it, I don't ask Drupal for permissions. I don't have to think about it. I know what my markup is, I know what I need to do, and I can just get it done quickly, fast, and easy. This operation in Drupal 7 was a pain in the ass. I can't even remember how I did it the first time, but I just remember like cursing a lot. And for me, that's a high level. So this is the first example just to like demonstrate what we can actually do inside of the template. So inside of the template, we can now begin actually we have control structure, we have control over the structure, we have an idea that can actually grab out pretty much every element of Drupal flows allows. But here's another really sweet thing. This was actually the thing that got me to be like, hey, Twig is awesome. It's called a Twig block. In Twig, it's just called the block. But the idea of trying to get the developer community to accept that we would rename blocks just because of Twig also used the name block was kind of pretty much put off the table quickly. So we had a quick discussion and we ended up saying, well, in the Twig world, we will talk about this as a Twig block. And that has been accepted by many people. So when you hear block, that's just usual Drupal talk, but a Twig block is a Drupal-Twig naming. And what it does is it takes a part of your template and separate that out so you can exchange that if you hit certain conditions. So let's say I want to do something special for my front page. I only want to have one page template. What I do is say, okay, start a block through and do an end block. So everything that's inside of this can be exchanged. And then I taste on the theme hook suggestion there is. And I go up here and say, okay, page dash front. Okay, so in my page Twig file, I'll do block, no header block. Change me if I'm on the front page, end block. Then on my page dash front, which would usually be this big ass copy of your old page, and then you like have duplicate markup and you have like 2 different pages to change it. That would be a little bit of a pain in the ass. Then I tell Twig, hey, you know what? Extend on my page file, and then if we have a header block anywhere there, no, just add this piece in, exchange that out. So if I want to note, it just says, hey, change me on the front page, and boom, if I want my front page, I'm actually changed. That means that if we have a note, a specific like note content type, and you have like long, complicated structures in there, you just need to change that little column. You can actually do that directly in your template layer without having to like duplicate your files. This is when you begin to like taste a little bit on how your possibilities of keeping your structures and the markup of the file system so clean is, I'm getting all like, hey baby. Another cool thing that we sneaked in, this is how Translate looked like 5 months ago. And if you haven't done a theme that has translation in on it, you would then know that this is a pain in the ass to work with. It's cumbersome, it does not work. In Drupal now we have the trans tag inside of Twig. And what trans does is says, well, this is a thing that needs to be translated. And you can just put in whatever you want in it. So if you want to put in something for the suites, you can do that. Are people completely confused right now about Twig? Or is it like, this sounds pretty good? There's like people, I've done this talk a lot of times, and it's like, they're looking at what is this actually. So this is, all of these things, by the way, is real code that I did really fast. Figuring out how I did that whole loop in my template took me about 15 to 20 minutes, and I'm an idiot. So that it is so dead easy to work with this language that it's kind of absurd. The problem is that we have not worked enough with it in Drupal. There's very few of us. And that's actually where we come to the next thing. So to get all of these things and make the theme layer better, because we're not only talking about changing how a variable is, we're also talking about how we want to theme stuff in the future. How do we want to work as front-end developers inside of Drupal? We are completely misusing the fact that, hey, we actually have, we're changing the theme layer to also change the way we're actually working. Because this is probably going to be the only time ever in Drupal's history that we get the chance for that. So it's kind of like, it is now or never. And that is why we need more heroes. Because right now, the people who brings you all of this is a very small group. We're pretty much carrying all of Drupal's front end on our shoulders. And the amount of people that have died in the process so far is very, very high. I'm pretty sure I'm more or less the only one still standing from 2 years ago. And I just think it's because of an obsession now for me. But 8 years of Drupal hatred has now like turned into like, I want to see this done. So we're doing each week, we're having a weekly meeting. And we figured out it was Tuesdays here at 6 p.m. It's a worldwide meeting, so I get up from Copenhagen at 1 a.m. each Thursday morning just to coordinate. Yes, it's a little bit of a pain in the ass, especially on Thursdays where I have my daughter as well. So I start by doing tea parties and like building castles and stuff with her, and then I end up the day by sitting talking Twig. So like 3 in the morning, and then I go up and get up with her at 6 in the morning, and again, yes, it's a little bit tiresome. But for you guys, you are lucky because Cuts are called the shots about the timing. So you get it at 6 p.m. instead. And it's basically just a Drupal hang-up where we sit and talk about where we are at right now with the project, who needs help with what, where do we want to like coordinate and process it forward. But that's kind of one thing that requires that you actually put off the time. Tomorrow we're going to have a code sprint. How many here know what a code sprint is? Good. We're not actually going to do so much sprinting as like finding a task and working on it. We're going to do a lot of discussions on the fields. I started a code sprint in Stockholm 3 weeks ago, I think, where we basically talked about what's wrong with the field, how we want to make it better, and just targeting only the field and going as hard as it as possible. This week, while you guys have been like doing nothing for the week, in second we gathered about 300 developers, where about 20 of them was only been hammering on Twig, and me and Cuts have been like doing daily, almost kind of like stand-ups and figure out which kind of issues you want to work on and just push it forward. So we had a huge amount of code coming in, and what we want to do tomorrow is actually keep that work up. And there's a lot of like basic HTML prototyping, describing what it actually is we want and what we do. And I would love to actually have like open discussions if we even go in the right way. But sometimes it's a little bit hard to figure out, are we actually doing this right? I have for the last couple of years, because John Albin used to be like the lead of Drupal8. I have accused him of everything that was wrong in Drupal, but it's of course very, very not fair. Maybe because it's fun. John has now publicly multiple times said that everything that's wrong with Drupal8 is my fault. And that is on one side very, very scary, and no, it's actually extremely scary, because we cannot just put these things on the shoulders of 1 or 2 or 3 people. We need a huge collaboration, and we as front-enders actually need to step up to this plate and do something for the system. So tomorrow at 10, just showing up and being in the room and answering questions that will be thrown you, like, how does this markup look? How about this? How about this? This is what we want to achieve. It's now we need to do that, because in a year when you're sitting and theming a Drupal8 site, if we don't take this discussion now, it's just going to be the same bullshit as it's always been. And we don't want that. We actually want to make this beautiful. I want to have Drupal8's theme layer to be so fucking amazing that people want to work with Drupal just because of the theme layer, not because of everything else. And I do think that personally this is the biggest change in Drupal8. I know they have that CMI and all these other things that Larry talked about, OP, blah, 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 blah. I don't care. This is where the biggest change is. It's completely changed the way we're going to work. So tomorrow at 10. The reason we don't say 9 is because I know front-enders. They don't get up at 9. That's not a thing we do. And just showing up, helping out. We have a huge documentation tab as well, and just be able to like spit off some of the ideas we have. If you don't do that, basically Drupal Twig is the hashtag. DrupalTwig.org is where the real party is at. It's where we, if you're really into coding stuff, That's a site that Kotlin and Joel set up. It's pretty much scraping D.O from all of the Twig tasks there is, and we're trying to organize them there. We have actually ended up now at the level where we have set up even a Trello board to be like managing ourselves, which is if there's anybody who knows a really good project manager who would like to work with 10, 15, hopefully 20 front-end developers and changing Drupal, I would really like to talk with him, because I'm not a project manager and I'm doing it with Kotlin right now, and I'm pretty sure he's not a project manager either. We're really bad at this, and bad project managers are some of the worst thing you can get. So we would love if somebody knows somebody who want to work with us and figure out how to do this and plan this stuff with us. That help would be highly, highly appreciated. Resources right now, the Twig documentation. Oh, God damn it, I'm clever. Sorry, this is a link. I'm an idiot. Drupal8.org this is the link to the official documentation. Another thing is like there's so little documentation right now on Twig, which is kind of strange. So that's another thing we hope that people are gonna come in and help us with. These slides can be found on my GitHub account, Drupal8 Twig Chicago 2014. It's kind of fun actually to go back. I have done this slide today, like this is the third version of it, to see how stuff has changed. So, questions? Yes? Just modify GitHub IO, it's in there and all the other stuff. Contra has a question.
What field are we working on?
What field?
Tomorrow. What field? You didn't explain it much.
Oh, okay. So in Drupal we have the fields, like a field that gets printed out on a page. That simple little thing has, that's where we have like the 3 div wrappers and a ton of classes and all of that stuff. What we're trying to do now is finding a better way to do that in a way that makes it architectural perfect and make it CSS-wise and class naming-wise and how we're going to work with that out of the box to be a piece of beauty. Even like how the template file looks. So having completely new people who have never watched and know nothing about Twig. The only thing you know about Twig is how to get the variable out because you ended up in this room. If we can get you to actually sit down and just look at that template and be like, okay, I understand this, but I don't understand that. Those kind of things is extremely helpful for us right now, so we know if we're going the right way. I mean, 2 days ago, me and Kotlin went complete apeshit in that field template and built this like huge colossal like class naming generating things. That one of the other guys, he looked at like, dudes, this is way too complicated. Like, no, but we can do all these amazing things. Like, okay, we might gotta go back a step. We need these opinions because we're way too deep into understanding how simple stuff is done anymore. So, and it's the opinions you come with now is probably going to form how stuff will be done. So when you open up your first Drupal8 site and look at the templates, you will actually know that you were the reason that we did this instead of doing that dumb shit we used to do. Because if nobody told us what to do, is WebChimp's argument for why shit didn't happen? Well, then we have to tell them how we're going to do that.
If we can do all of this awesome stuff for us, what's the pre-process layer for now?
I don't know. I would say that the pre-process, what we're hoping to do is one of the plans we have is actually dragging a lot of the, pre-process would be if you have specific things for the theme that it still needs to know about, where we don't want to do long and complicated like calls in to generate a certain variable. I would say the pre-process would be done for that. Another plan we have at this moment is actually dragging the whole way we generate all the classes for like a body or a field or a node. We'll drag that out into the template. So when you sit and look at the template, you can control every aspect of it instead of having these hard-coded big variables. It's going to be fun to see what pre-process actually will be used for. It is very strange to sit as an experienced Drupal front-ender and doing everything just in a template and having that power. It is. I run a column in the Drupal watchdog called the Angry Themer, and I'm kind of at the level of if we get all this stuff done, it's going to be the happy themer because the way we think in themes it's completely different. It is all of the stuff that I've learned over many years of pure frustration is I don't have to do that anymore. It's kind of like when we figured out that IE6 would not be supported anymore. All the dumb shit you do, you can just like remove that out of your head. There was a question over there.
I noticed that there was a project for Drupal8.
Yeah.
Is it possible to start playing with any of this on the current D7 site?
I know there was a dude who actually, there was a guy who forked my mothership team. He was actually the first one we saw ever do anything with Twig and Drupal, and I was not really sure how it worked, but he was fed up with the markup, and he was fed up with the template layer, and he geeked out, so he did that. He was actually the guy who showed us that at Frontend United, which made the whole room go like, oh shit, we want that. Can we get that instead of this? That was, I don't think he knows what impact that actually had. I have no idea. If you actually want to play with it, and we want to have people to play with it, there's a session at what time? 1:45, where not working in Drupal, but in Sculpin or some fishing thing is using the Twig engine. And if you're a front-ender, actually beginning to come in and play with that now, so we get enough experience of how Twig actually works. Because each day I'm playing around with it, I learn a little bit more like, oh, we can actually do this, we can actually do that. And by knowing that now, before we ship Drupal8 out, and that's been like the thing, Drupal7 came out, and then we began to play with it, and then a year and a half later, we begin to complain about what was wrong with it. If we can complain about it now, instead, like, hopefully 6 months before Drupal8 comes out, and by the way, I have no idea when it comes out. I dream about a beta release in Austin, and I hope for an Amsterdam release, which would finish the circle, like 2 times Amsterdam. That's a whole other thing. But we just need to play with it. I have no idea where that project is. I've not had time or anything else. Well, it's just Drupal8 all the time. Anybody else? Yes?
Is our implementation of Twig Drupalized in any way? So if I go out and find a tutorial or documentation on Twig, what am I going to have to forget to use it?
As far as we know at this point, well, there's one thing we have. When you drill into a variable, all of the hashtags, we have the bracket hashtag we have in a Drupal variable. We cannot get into that right now because Twig and Drupal thinks that is a comment. There's an issue open for that, so that's kind of the only thing where you cannot drill directly down. Besides,
it still can. It's just not as pretty. You
yeah.
use those brackets.
Okay.
Yeah, so you have like the var name brackets hashtag
But
variable.
anything that the Twig community is already doing,
All of that. We are not for the first time ever. We're not bastardizing a language to get it into our world. We are extending it like doing translation. That's the thing we're talking about. Extending like doing a filter for CSS class names, those kind of things.
Yeah.
But we
That's just a Twig filter.
What?
That's just a Twig filter.
Yeah, exactly.
We're using Twig.
We are using Twig the way Twig should be used. So if you have people on your team that's used to work like Sculpin and doing Twig stuff, they will go in and look at the template and be like, okay, I can just do this, I can just do that. And there's a lot of like exciting new things. You can like create templates, you can call and pass data through. That I was asking around, everybody know how to use this, and they're like, it would be so sad if we don't get all of the stuff in right now. Good thing is we can always, when 8.0 comes out, we're going to have an 8.1, 8.2, and so forth. And the reason we were talking about a new base theme coming out, we were talking about that a long time ago, how we would do it. And the problem has been that those who built that theme were developers, so they didn't have that same expertise in what we wanted to have out of the theme. So we cannot really build the theme before we have a Drupal site going. So that's one of the projects further on. Is like when we get 8.0 up, if somebody want to begin to like build a contribute theme, we're gonna yeah. There's a question more.
Is there any support for Camel?
I have no idea. Honestly, I have absolutely no idea. The question was if there's going to be support for Hamel. At this point, I don't think so.
Maybe in Contrib.
Maybe the things we're expecting to see in Contrib is pretty crazy because we already know like everything. So before we do lunch, this is my handle. You can like ping me on that on every possible device you want. If you want to be involved in this project, pretty much ping me. If you have any kind of ability to communicate, ping me, and if you want to help out. Drupal Twig is kind of our hashtag where we put out like important things. So DrupalTwig.org is where all of our issue is. And by that, I would say it's lunchtime, and thank you for staying.